Yes, I know I'm so late for this. But anyways, let's go. This is the 4th day in the SG World Cup, and this day we had a ton of broadcast games. We did a 7-hour stream, which actually it was more like an 8-hour stream, but we had 7 matchups on that one. And the first one was this one, Austria and SG World. And obviously, because we have so many games to recap here, and at the end we have Group A games where we have Finland against Canada and Sweden against the United States. So obviously those are the 2 biggest games. We won't spend too much time on these games. So the first one here, Austria, SG World, and SG World, the clear favorite in this matchup. It took them to the second period of game 1 to get their first goal, but then after that they just kept going, and I believe this game was 5-0 at one point. And yeah, here they scored the 5-0 goal. Austria did get a couple of goals here towards the end of the third, so at least they got something going here in this game. It did end 5-3 right there. Kiss with his second goal. Second game, honestly a pretty similar one in a lot of ways. Here they tied up right at the end of the period, so it was 1-1 after the first, but then after this there was a nice little dangle right there. SG World scores, and they just kind of keep scoring. This game got a little bit out of control. There was a lot of goals in both ends. So yeah, a 7-4 win and a 5-3 win for SG World there. Next up we have Slovakia against Great Britain. Like, I'm not saying this to hurt anybody's feelings, but this was the series where I thought I was gonna fall asleep. Now, I did know that there was gonna be, 5 more matchups that I was gonna be covering that day, so that might have something to do with it. But like, I'm not joking when I say this. I actually felt like I was gonna fall asleep at some point during these games. There we saw Great Britain had the first goal, but then Slovakia ties it up pretty soon. And then in the third period, Slovakia is able to find a man right there in front of the net. They got the 2-1 lead, and that is how the game ended. We didn't see all that much offense from either of these teams. They're right there towards the end, though. Great Britain did have a chance. They just weren't able to do it, and into game 2 we go. As here, it was once again second period. If you saw the stats right there, that was only Slovakia's third shot of the game where they got the first goal. But after that, they just kept scoring. So they went up 3-0 here. And then it was 4-0 already. What a beautiful goal right there, by the way. But yeah, 4-0. Then Great Britain got their first goal of the game, which would also be the last goal of the game. So the second game ended 4-1. Nothing too much to say about this series. Just 2-1, 4-1. It's been nice to see that Group B was pretty even. Unlike Group C, though. Here in Group C, and this is the wrong game, so let's try that again. It was Switzerland against Ukraine. And as I said, Switzerland's obviously a huge favorite here. But look at this. Ukraine tied it up right here in game 1. After this, though, game 1 did not go very well for the Ukrainians in this one, and Switzerland obviously a strong team as well. So it was 4-1, then 5-1, and the game ended 6-1 actually. But in game 2, we had quite a bit of a different start to the game, as Ukraine scores right away in the first period, and then they score once again right here. Their captain. This was obviously a big shock, and yeah, there Switzerland scores, but if you saw the clock, there was only 25 minutes left in the game when Switzerland was finally able to get their first goal. But then, obviously, Switzerland did bounce back, and this is still in the second period, right from the blue line. I honestly don't know what happened there. The goalie was in butterfly, but for some reason, the puck just slides through him almost. This was a pretty rough way for the Swiss to get their first lead of the game against Ukraine, as Ukraine was honestly playing a strong game. So it does end 6-2, but Ukraine almost just this close. And then the fourth game of the day, and this was the big one. Well, the big one when it comes to these Group C games. Anyways, Czechia against Germany. Both teams undefeated before this matchup. And these games, honestly, they were just super close. The very first shift of the game, Czechia got a lot of opportunities and they had all the pressure at the start of the game. But then I believe this is the exact play where disaster strikes. And by the disaster, I mean Germany. As their first shot of the game, they get the early 1-0 lead. And that is just not what you like as Team Czechia. As you had all the chances to start the game and Germany got the early goal. And then they get the second goal of the game as well. So just a real tough start to the game for Team Czechia. Then we also had a little bit of a disconnection. That's why you see the numbers on the top left be a little different. But Czechia, after that, they get on the board. It was 2-1, but then it was 3-1. But then still in the second period here, Czechia scores. It's 3-2. So all of a sudden, the game just kind of opened up. And we started seeing a lot more goals as here Tove just tried to pass that to the front of the net, goes off the goalie and in, and the game was 3-3 here going into the third period. So Czechia, a really strong battle to climb back from 3-1 to make it even, but then Germany scored, and that would, unfortunately for the Czechs, be the last goal of the game. And obviously a well-played game for Team Germany as they're able to give Czechia the first loss of the tournament. And the second game had a lot of similarities as it was the Czechs early on giving all kinds of pressure there. And then once again, just like in game one, that's a massive save by the way for the Czechs, but then this one does beat him. So Germany has the 1-0 lead. And obviously both of these teams, just really, really strong teams as here they actually score a similar goal as in game one. So Czechia did tie this one up, but the same thing ends up happening and Germany scores to make it 2-1. And then not too long after, their captain strikes and it's 3-1. And that would end up being the end result of the second game. So a 4-3 win and a 3-1 win for Germany. Absolutely massive wins for them. Now moving on to the last Group C game. It's Norway against Denmark. And in this one, there's a lot of things to talk about here. So first of all, Team Denmark, their official roster for this tournament included 6 players. Now, one of these players was not able to play in this matchup. So he was able to call a friend of his, I believe, to replace him in Team Denmark's goal for this matchup. And also, this matchup had a lot of very interesting things happening as Denmark, the underdog here, scored first, obviously. We switched perspectives mid-game because the audio wasn't on point on the Team Denmark stream. Norway tied it up. And also, just to note, we had some disconnection issues throughout the whole stream this day. So we actually only covered the first match of this series, which I'm gonna explain why it was probably the right call to only cover this first game. There, Norway scores their second goal. And honestly, up until this point, this game had been very even. As you can see here, the disconnection happened at around this point. So it was 2-1 before we had a disconnection issue. But then in the third period, Norway does kind of just score some goals, you know? So they make this game not a very close one in the end. They win 8-2. And in doing so, I don't honestly know. I don't really know what happened in that Team Denmark locker room after that loss, because they played the second game. They played the second game off stream, and the game ended 18-1. 18-1 was the score in the second game. That is just mind-blowing to me, because this matchup honestly the first two periods, the game was 2-1 here. And honestly, Denmark was playing pretty good hockey. Okay. We move on. And we move on to Group A. USA against Sweden. And this isn't even the biggest matchup of the night, arguably, as the other one is Canada against Finland. But yeah, USA against Sweden. The previous day, these teams had also played. USA played against Finland. Sweden played against Canada. Now, going into this matchup, obviously, once again, as I talked about in the previous video as well, the server advantage in your home games is massive. So the first game is played on the Swedish server, the second game is played on the American server. And if you remember from day 3 recap, we saw Canada push Sweden very, very close in the Team Sweden home game. And obviously, USA was gonna try to do the exact same thing. And actually, USA scores the first goal. This is the second day that these teams are playing in this tournament. And there's the tying goal for Team Sweden. But honestly, I feel like the teams have gotten used to the ping a little bit, because as we'll see in this 2-game series, both of these games end up being surprisingly close. When you think about the server advantage, you think immediately that the home team is just gonna absolutely dominate the other team. But that has surprisingly not been the case in many of these games. Here we see USA tying the game, which is ridiculous. Tying the game on the away server. It's 2-2 midway through the game, as I'm just scanning through whatever else happened here in the game. And here, USA scores again. So they have the 3-2 lead against Sweden on Sweden's home server. But wait, Sweden ties it up. And this would also be what the score is headed into overtime, as the Americans actually were able to create some scoring chances even here in the third period. As you see the shots on goal, USA had more shots on goal than Sweden in this game, as there's a massive save. And here we see the last attempts of the game, off regulation. Sweden denied again right there, and 10 seconds left. Sweden one more opportunity in the offensive zone, and USA is just able to send this game into overtime, which is huge. They're the first team in the tournament that was able to push their opponents into overtime on the away server. They do come out short, unfortunately for them. Sweden takes the game in overtime, but USA must have been pretty happy with that result, as in game 2 they strike first very early on. But even here, Sweden actually ties up the game. And as I said, these games were just surprisingly even. Well, that's not the complete truth here, as to be fair, the Americans were dominating this game quite clearly, at least on the shots on goal department. There they scored a 2-1 goal, and then at the very end of period 2, they scored to make it 3-1, and from this there was no coming back for Sweden. They did end up scoring one, so it was 3-2 very late in the game. As here's one of the nicest goals we saw all day. Fisher with that little spinorama. 4-2 is your final score. As here we saw a big save. Carlson made that right there at the end. But you might be thinking, why am I not talking about the fact that, holy crap, USA was able to push Sweden into overtime? Why am I not like super hyped about it? Well, this next matchup will explain that. So Finland against Canada. In my papers, in my tournament predictions, I had these teams 1 and 2. And at this point, after what happened in these games, I'm not sure if I still hold that view. Especially the fact that I had Canada as the number 1. As Finland, obviously this is the Finnish home game, so we were expecting Finland to be strong here. But anyways, Finland was very early on, up by 2. Here, Dumoulin on the power play though, he scores a beautiful short side snipe. But then Finland just kept going. They scored to make it 3-1. And it was 6-1 already, as Ethan, what a goal on the away server. That was a nasty goal. I gotta give it to him. But yeah, this game ends, I believe, 9-4. And excuse me, it was actually 9-3. So 9-3 for the Finns on their home server. And then started what will be remembered as the craziest game of the tournament, unless we see this same thing happen in the playoffs. Team Finland now travels, haha, tournament is played online. But yeah, they go on the North American server, and they get the first goal immediately off the first face-off. And no, that's not the craziest part about this game, because the second face-off, they score again. So the game is 2-0 with under a minute played, and oh yeah. So Canada is just gonna score. They just had a slow start to the game. They gave up 2 goals. What's the matter? That's nothing. 2 goals. Canada is gonna come back quickly and win this game, right? But wait, Finland has a breakaway. Oh, actually, no, they didn't score off of this. Actually, yeah, the Canadians, they tied it up. But anyways, the Finns off to an unbelievable first period. Oh yeah, the Canadians scored again. I forgot they scored right there. So it was 3-2 going into the It was 4-2. Excuse me. It was 4-2 going into the first intermission. But so far, what we had was a hot Team Finland offensively, and they strike once again in the second period. Vattu on the wraparound. They make it 3-4, which obviously on the away server, you're still in a horrible place, you know? You're down in the game and your opponent has the server advantage. And now you're down by 2 goals. And very soon, guess what? No, okay, not yet. But now, you're down by 3 goals. And at this point, what's going through my head is that Team Finland won game 1 with the score of 9-3. They're just happy to keep the goal differential in their favor, right? But these dudes had some different plans. Nikke scored. Vattu scored also. And then, what is absolutely absurd, Finland ties the game. Now, we've seen close games between North Americans and Europeans in this tournament. But it's not like Canada is in trouble here, right? It's not like that, right? It's not like Canada is about to lose this game, right? As Mr. Eki here demonstrates that, oh, actually, Canada, you might lose this game. But wait, final seconds of the game. Finland is up 7-6. 15 seconds on the clock. But wait, does Canada have other plans? Do they have other plans here? It seems like they do. It seems like no matter what Finland did, no matter how many they scored in this game, it was still gonna be a Canadian victory in the end, as they scored there with just under 10 seconds left. And we are going to overtime. So a great game already by Finland, though. They pushed the game into OT. Wait a minute. Hold on. Finland has a power play. Dude, Finland is on the power play in overtime. So what if they're not just happy with that 1 point, like what the Americans did against Sweden right there in the other game? What if Finland is actually playing for a win here? What if something crazy happened here? Like this? Can you even believe that? Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. Finland beats Canada on the Canadian server. They almost took 6 points. Canada kind of got bailed out by the fact that they scored with under 10 seconds left to tie up the game. But Finland finds a way to win the second game as well in overtime. So yeah, the Group A standings after the first 4 games for each nation here. Also, I can't show the other ones because I'm recording this after even more games have to be played in both groups B and C. So I'll only show the Group A standings at this point. 8 points in 4 games, USA 7 points in 4 games, Sweden at 5, Canada at 4, and these teams are gonna be facing off once again on Thursday. So Thursday, late evening games, Sweden against Finland. It's 10 p.m. Central European time, and then Canada against the US is, I believe, at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, that's where we sit right now. Games continue on Thursday. Also, these were Sunday's games. There's also big games on Monday and Tuesday, so I'll have to recap those right now, actually, after I finish recording this one. So that's the video, Monday recap, coming out hopefully very soon.